How's everybody doing today? Hey, Spangle Lime. Hi, Sir Wolfie. Today is a book, Wolfie, where I read chapter 2 of Postmortem by Patricia Cornwell. This is my Writer's Workshop series where we go over a particular chapter of a book, and then we discuss the chapter in terms of character development, how the scene was set, and things of that nature. And after I finish reading the chapter, I usually wind up inviting 1 or 2 people on the stream to be a guest with me. There you go. That is pretty much the format. Thanks for showing up, those of you who have shown up. This is also going to be a little bit of a charity stream for Traname. So let me go ahead and start this out and say, Traname is a very dear friend of mine online. She has run into a bit of a problem, and she's finding herself homeless because her roommates were less than ideal. Let's put it that way. There are more details on the GoFundMe link that will be circulating ever so often on the live stream. So be on the lookout for that. Good morning, Eric. How are you? I know. This is one that I haven't come across. This was, I think, one of her very first Scarpetta novels. So we're being introduced to her and how she's acclimating to everything from what I understand from the background of this book. Yep. Chapter 1 is the first live stream of this series. So I went ahead and I read chapter 1, I think, last week. So every Saturday about this time is when I generally start. Wait a minute, I was supposed to start at noon. Whoopsie, I started a little early. Either that or my clock's running slow. Or fast, or however. Yeah, I started a little fast. I got a little nervous. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, Patricia Cornwell is a very acclaimed author. She used to be a medical examiner in Virginia, or work in the medical examiner's office in the state of Virginia, rather. She never stops studying any type of forensics or any kind of forensic science, so she can keep her books as up to date as possible to give you that realism in her novels. Yeah, I know it was supposed to start at noon. I got a little excited. Now, I could try this back at noon. I mean, we could end it now and come back in half an hour. I mean, it's up to you guys. We got another one that just popped into the chat. Yeah, I know. I got a little excited. When it comes to books and literature and stuff like that, I get a little excited. I got a little nervous too. So there is that. It won't. Next Saturday will be noon right on the dot Eastern Standard Time because I'm an Eastern kind of girl. Yeah, this is a different kind of book club Spangle line because I don't require people to get the book on hand because I know not a lot of people are going to be able to afford the book. So what I do is I read the book and then we discuss it. So yeah, that's pretty much the way it works. And then when we discuss the book, that's when we get into the nitty gritty of it. And once this book is over, I'm going to throw it out there to my subscribers and they can pick the next book in this particular series right here to see if we want to go Patricia Cornwell or Patterson or completely flip the script and do another genre in general. So there is that. So let me go ahead and start chapter 2 of Patricia Cornwell's Postmortem. The white clock face floated like a full moon in the dark sky, rising above the old dome train station, the railroad tracks, and the I-95 overpass. The great clock's filigree hands stopped when the last passenger train did many years before. It was 12:17. It would always be 12:17 in the city's lower end where Health and Human Services decided to erect its hospital for the dead. Time has stopped here. Buildings are boarded up and torn down. Traffic and freight trains perpetually rumble and roar like a distant, discontented sea. The earth is a poisoned shore of weed-patched, raw dirt littered with debris where nothing grows and there are no lights after dark. Nothing moves here except the truckers and the travelers and the trains speeding along their tracks of concrete, metal, and steel. The white clock face watched me as I drove through the darkness. Watched me like the white face in my dream. I nosed the station wagon through an opening in the chain-link fence and parked behind the structure, the stucco building where I spent virtually every day of the past 2 years. The only state vehicle in the lot aside from mine was the gray Plymouth belonging to Niles Vander, the fingerprints examiner. I had called him right after Marino called me. Set into effect after the second strangling was a new policy. If there was another, Vander was to meet me in the morgue immediately. By now he was inside the x-ray room and setting up the laser. Hi, Gerbil. Light was spilling on the tarmac from the open bay, and 2 paramedics were pulling a stretcher bearing a black body pouch out of the back of an ambulance. Deliveries went on through the night. Anybody who died violently, unexpectedly, or suspiciously in Central Virginia was sent here, no matter the hour or the day. The young men in their blue jumpsuits looked surprised to see me as I walked through the bay and held open the door leading inside the building. You're out early, Doc. Suicide from Mecklenburg, the other attendant volunteered. Threw himself in front of a train, scattered him over 50 feet of tracks. Yo, pieces and parts. The stretcher bumped through the open doorway and into the white-tiled corridor. The body pouch apparently was defective or torn. Blood leaked through the bottom of the stretcher and left a trail of speckled red. The morgue had a distinctive odor, the stale stench of death no amount of air deodorizer could mask. I had been led here blindfolded. Had I been led here blindfolded, I would have known exactly where I was. At this hour of the morning, the smell was more noticeable, more unpleasant than usual. The stretcher clattered loudly enough through the hollow stillness as the attendants wheeled the suicide into the stainless steel refrigerator. I turned right into the morgue office where Fred, the security guard, was sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup and waiting for the ambulance attendants to sign in the body and be on their way. He was sitting on the edge of the desk, ducking out of view, just as he always did when a body was delivered. A gun to his head wouldn't have been sufficient incentive enough to make him escort anybody inside the refrigerator. Toe tags dangling from cold feet protruding from sheets had a peculiar effect on him. A long glance at the wall clock. His 10-hour shift almost at an end. "We've got another strangling coming in," I bluntly told him. "Sure am sorry," shaking his head. "I tell you, it's hard to imagine anybody doing something like that. All them poor young ladies," still shaking his head. "It will be here any minute, and I want you to make sure the bay door is shut and remains shut after the body's brought in, Fred. The reporters will be out in droves. I don't want anybody within 50 feet of this building. Is that clear?" I sounded hard and sharp, and I knew it. My nerves were singing like a power line. "Yes, ma'am." A vigorous nod. "I'll keep an eye out. I sure will." I reached for the telephone and stabbed out my home number. Bertha picked up on the second ring and sounded drugged with sleep when she hoarsely asked, "Hello?" "Just checking in." "I'm here. Lucy hasn't budged, Dr. K. Sleeping like a log. Didn't even hear me come in." "Thank you, Bertha. I can't thank you enough. I don't know when I'll be home." "Here till I see you then, Dr. K." Don't forget to share this out to get more people on here to see how many people we can get watching the stream to help out Tranime. Bertha was on notice these days. If I got called out in the middle of the night, so did she. I'd given her a key to the front door and instructions about the operation of the burglar alarm. She probably arrived at my house just minutes after I left for the scene. It dully drifted through my mind that when Lucy got out of bed in several hours, she'd find Bertha inside the kitchen instead of her Auntie Kay. I had promised to take Lucy to Monticello today. On a nearby surgical cart was the Blue Power unit, smaller than a microwave oven, with a row of bright green lights across the front. It was suspended in the pitch darkness of the X-ray room like a satellite in empty space, a spiral cord running from it to a pencilized wand filled with seawater. The laser we acquired last winter was a relatively simple device. "Hello, Mariel." In ordinary light sources, atoms and molecules emit light independently and in many different wavelengths. But if an atom is excited by heat, and if light of a certain wavelength is impinged upon it, an atom can be stimulated to emit light in phase. "Give me just another minute." Niles Vander was working various knobs and switches, his back to me. "She's slow to warm up this morning," he adding in a despondent mumble. "So am I, for that matter." I was standing on the other side of the X-ray table, watching his shadow through a pair of amber-tinted goggles. Directly below me was the dark shape of Lori Peterson's remains, the cover from her bed open but still underneath her. I stood in the darkness waiting for what seemed a very long time, my thoughts undistracted, my hands perfectly still, my senses undisturbed. Her body was warm, her life so recently ended, it seemed to linger about her like an odor. Vander announced "ready" and flipped a switch. Instantly spitting from the wand was a rapidly flashing, synchronized light as brilliant as liquid chrysoberyl. It did not dispel darkness, but seemed to absorb it. It did not glow, but rather float over a small surface area. He was a flickering lab coat across the table as he began by directing the wand at her head. We explored inches of the suffused flesh at a time. Tiny fibers lit up like hot wires, and I began collecting them with forceps, my movements staccato in the strobe, creating the illusion of slow motion as I went from her body on the X-ray table to the evidence buttons and envelopes on a cart. Hey, Ghost Dog. Back and forth. Everything was disconnected. The laser's bombardment illuminated a corner of a lip, a rash of pinpoint hemorrhages on the cheekbone, or a wing of the nose, isolating each feature. My gloved fingers working the forceps seemed to belong to somebody else. Darkness and light were dizzying, and the only way I could maintain my equilibrium was to channel my concentration into one thought at a time, as if I, like the laser beam, was in phase two. All of me was in sync with what I was doing. The sum of my mental energy coalesced into a single wavelength. One of the guys who brought her in, Vander remarked, told me she was a surgical resident at VMC. Did you know her? The question took me by surprise. Something inside me tightened like a fist. I was on the faculty of VMC, where there were hundreds of medical students and residents. There was no reason I should have known her. I didn't answer except to give directions such as, a little to the right, or hold it right there for a minute. Vander was slow and deliberate and tense, as was I. The feeling of helplessness and frustration was getting to us. So far, the laser had proven to be no better than a Hoover vacuum cleaner that collected miscellaneous debris. We tried it on maybe 20 cases by now, only a few of which actually merited its use. In addition to its usefulness in finding fibers and other trace evidence, it reveals various components of perspiration that fluoresce like a neon sign when stimulated by a laser. Hi, the Batman. How are you doing this morning? Or this afternoon from your part of the world? Theoretically, a fingerprint left on human skin can emit light and may be identified in cases where traditional powder and chemical methods will fail. I knew of only one case where prints on skin were found, in South Florida, where a woman was murdered inside a health spa, and the assailant had tanning oil on his hands. Neither Vander or I was expecting our luck to be any better than it had been in the past. What we saw didn't register at first. The wand was probing several inches of Lori Peterson's right shoulder when directly over her right clavicle, 3 irregular smudges suddenly leapt out as if they were painted with phosphorus. We both stood still and stared. Then he whistled through his teeth as a faint chill ran up my spine. No, I am not going to read in the voice of Kim Jong-un. This is a serious book. Retrieving a jar of powder and a magna brush, Vander delicately dusted what appeared to be 3 latent fingerprints left on Lori Peterson's skill. I'm doing all right. I am doing all right. I dared to hope. Any good? They're partials, he said abstractedly as he began taking photographs with an MP4 Polaroid camera. The ridge's details damn good. Good enough to classify, I think. I'll run these babes through the computer right away. Looks like the same residue, I thought out loud. The same stuff on his hands. The monster had signed his work again. It was too good to be true. The fingerprints were too good to be true. It looks the same, all right, but he must have had a lot more of it on his hands this time. The killer had never left his prints in the past, but the glittery residue, which apparently caused them to fluoresce, was something we'd grown to expect. There was more of it. As Vander began probing her neck, a constellation of tiny white stars popped out like shards of glass, hid by headlights on a dark street. He held the wand in place as I reached for a sterilized gauze pad. We found the same glitter scattered over the bodies of the first 3 strangling victims, more of it in the 3rd case and in the 2nd, and in the least amount found in the 1st. Samples had been sent to the labs. So far, the strange residue had not been identified beyond determining it was inorganic. We weren't closer to knowing what it was, though by now we had quite a long list of substances it couldn't be. Over the past few weeks, Vander and I had run several series of tests, smearing everything from margarine to body lotions on our own forearms to see what reacted to the laser and what didn't. Fewer samples lit up than either of us had supposed, and nothing blazed as brightly as the unknown glittery residue. I gently wedged a finger under the electrical cord ligature around Lori Peterson's neck, exposing an angry red furrow in the flesh. The margin wasn't clearly defined. The strangulation was slower than I'd originally thought. I could see the faint abrasions from the cords having slipped in place several times. It was loose enough to keep her barely alive for a while. Then suddenly, it was jerked tight. There were 2 or 3 sparkles clinging to the cord, and that was all. Try the ligature around her ankles, I said quietly. We moved down. The same white sparkles were there too, but again, very few of them. There was none of this residue, whatever it was, anywhere on her face, none in her hair or on her legs. We found several of the sparkles on her forearms and a spangling of them over her upper arms and breasts. A constellation of the tiny white stars clung to the cords savagely, binding her wrists and back, and there was a scattering of the glitter over her cut gown as well. I moved away from the table, lit a cigarette, and began reconstructing. The assailant had some material on his hands that was deposited wherever he touched his victim. After Lori Peterson's gown was off, perhaps he gripped her right shoulder, and his fingertips left the smudges over her clavicle. One thing I felt sure of. For the concentration of this material to be so dense over her clavicle, he must have touched her there first. This was puzzling. A piece that seemed to fit, but didn't really. From the beginning, I'd assumed he was restraining his victims immediately, subduing them, perhaps at knife point, and then binding them before he cut off their clothing or did anything else. The more he touched, the less of the residue was left on his hands. Why this high concentration over her clavicle? Was this area of her skin exposed when he began his assault? I wouldn't have supposed so. An interlocking cotton material, soft and stretchy and fashioned to look almost exactly like a long-sleeve t-shirt. There were no buttons or zippers, and the only way for her to have put it on was to pull it over her head. She would have been covered to her neck. How would the killer touch the bare skin over her clavicle if she still had her gown on? Why was there such a high concentration of the residue at all? We'd never found such a high concentration before. I went out into the hallway where several uniformed men were leaning against the wall, chatting. I asked one of them to raise Marino on the radio and have him call me right away. I heard Marino's voice crackle back. 10-4. I paced the hard tile floor inside the autopsy suite with labels and sinks and carts lined with surgical instruments. A faucet was dripping somewhere. Disinfectant smelled sweetly revolting, only smelled pleasant when there was worse smells lurking beneath it. On the desk mocked me with its silence. Marino knew I was waiting by the phone. He was having a good time knowing that. It was idle speculation to go back to the beginning and try to figure out what had gone wrong. About it anyway. What it was about me. I had been polite to Marino the first time we met, had offered him a firm and respectful handshake while his eyes went flat as two tarnished pennies. 20 minutes passed before the telephone rang. Marino was still at the Peterson house, he said, interviewing the husband, who was, in the detective's words, as goofy as a shithouse rat. I told him about the sparkles. I repeated what I'd explained to him in the past. It was possible they might be from some household substance, consistent in all of the homicide scenes. Some oddball, something like the killer looked for and incorporated into his ritual. Baby powder, lotions, cosmetics, cleansers. So far we had ruled out many things which, in a way, was the point. If the substance wasn't indigenous to the scenes, and in my heart I didn't think it was, then the killer was carrying it in with him, perhaps unaware, and this could be important and eventually lead us to where he worked or lived. The killer is a Martian. I like that one. Not a theory I would think for Patricia Cornwell, so that's pretty cute. That's pretty funny, though. Let me see if I can tweet this out again and get some more people in here. All right, let's see. If I spell it right, it'll work, right? All right. Yeah, Marino's voice came over the line. Well, I'll poke around the cabinets and so forth, but I got my own thought, which is, the husband here is in the play, right? His practice every Friday night, which is why he gets in so late, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but actors wear grease paint. Only during dress rehearsals or performances. Yeah, he drawled. Well, according to him, a dress rehearsal is exactly what he had just before he came home and supposedly found his dead wife. And my little bell's ringing. My little voice is talking to me. I cut him off. Have you printed him? Place his card inside a plastic bag, and when you come in, bring it straight to me. He didn't get it. I didn't elaborate. I was in no mood to explain. The last thing Marino told me before hanging up was, "Don't know when that'll be, Doc. Got a feeling I'm going to be tight about him most of the day." No pun intended. Yeah. It was unlikely I would see him or the fingerprint card until Monday. Marino had a suspect. He was galloping down the same trail every cop gallops down. A husband could be St. Anthony in England when his wife was murdered in Seattle, and still the cops are suspicious of him first. Domestic shootings, poisonings, beatings, and stabbings are one thing, but a lust murder is another. Not many husbands would have the stomach for binding, raping, and strangling their wives. I blamed my disconcertedness on fatigue. I had been up since 2:33 a.m., 6 p.m. The police officers who came to the morgue were long gone. Vander went home around lunchtime. Wingo, one of my autopsy technicians, left not long after that, and there was no one inside the building but me. The quiet I usually craved was unnerving, and I could not seem to get warm. Stiff, the fingernails almost blue. Every time the telephone rang in the front office, I started. The minimal security in my office never seemed to worry anyone but me. Budget requests for an adequate security system were repeatedly refused. The commissioner thought in terms of property loss, and no theft was going to come into the morgue even if we put out welcome mats and left the doors open wide at all hours. Dead bodies are a better deterrent than guard dogs. The dead have never bothered me. It is the living I fear. Hi, Zeph. Crazed gunman walked into a local doctor's office several months back and sprayed bullets into a waiting room full of patients. I went to a hardware store and bought a chain and padlock myself, which after hours on weekends were used to reinforce the front glass double doors. Suddenly, while I was working at my desk, someone shook those front doors so violently the chain was still swaying when I forced myself to go down the hallway to check. No one was there. Sometimes 3 people tried to get in to use our restrooms, but when I looked out, I didn't see anyone. I returned to my office and was so jumpy that when I heard the elevator doors opening across the hall, I had a large pair of scissors in hand and was ready to use them. It was a day shift security guard. "Did you try to get in through the front glass doors a little while ago?" I asked. He glanced curiously at the scissors I was clutching and said he didn't. I'm sure it seemed an inane question. He knew the front doors were chained, and he had had a set of keys to the other doors throughout the building. He had no reason to try to get in through the front. An uneasy silence returned as I sat at my desk trying to dictate Lori Peterson's autopsy report. For some reason, I couldn't say anything. Couldn't bear to hear words out loud. It began to dawn on me that no one should hear those words. Not even Rose, my secretary. No one should hear about the glittery residue, the seminal fluid, the fingerprints, the deep tissue injuries to her neck, and worst of all, the evidence of torture. "Hey, Lord Cancer, how are you?" The killer was degenerating, becoming more hideously cruel. Rape and murder were no longer enough for him. It wasn't until I'd removed the ligatures from Lori Peterson's body and was making small incisions in suspicious reddish-tinted areas of skin and palpitating for broken bones that I realized what went on before she died. The contusions were so recent they were barely visible on the surface, but the incisions revealed the broken blood vessels under the skin, and the patterns were consistent with her having been struck with a blunt object, such as a knee or a foot. 3 ribs in a row on the left side were fractured, as were 4 of her fingers. There were fibers inside her mouth, mostly on her tongue, suggesting at some point she was gagged to prevent her from screaming. The violin on the music stand inside the living room, and in the surgical journals and books on the desk in the bedroom. Her hands. They were her most prized instruments, something with which she healed and made music. He must have deliberately broken her fingers one by one after she was bound. The micro-cassette recorder spun on, recording silence. I switched it off and swiveled my judge's chair around to the computer terminal. The monitor blinked from black to the sky blue of the word processing package. and black letters marched across the screen as I began typing the autopsy report myself. Hey, Benny. I didn't look at the weights and notes I'd scribbled on an empty glove packet when I was performing the autopsy. I knew everything about her. I had total recall. The phrase "within normal limits" was playing nonstop inside my head. There was nothing wrong with her. Her heart, her lungs, her liver, within normal limits. She died in perfect health. I typed on and on and on. Full pages blinking out as I was automatically given new screens until I suddenly looked up. Fred, the security guard, was standing in my doorway. I had no idea how long I'd been working. He was due back on duty at 8 p.m. Everything that had transpired since I saw him last seemed like a dream. A very bad dream. "You still here?" he said hesitantly. There's this funeral home downstairs for a pickup, but can't find the body. Come all the way from Mecklenburg. Don't know where Wingo is." "Wingo went home hours ago," I said. "What body?" "Someone named Roberts got hit by a train." I thought for a moment. Including Lori Peterson, there were 6 cases today. I vaguely recalled the train fatality. "He's in the refrigerator. They say they can't find him in there." I slipped off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. "Did you look?" His face broke into a sheepish grin. Fred backed away, shaking his head. "You know, Mrs. Capetta, I never go inside that box." And that is chapter 2. Now, let me see how many people are with me. I've got 12 people watching. Cool. All right. Hello, Apostmatic. For those of you that have heard what I have read so far, who would like a link to join the stream and discuss the chapter that I just read? All right. 1's in the chat if you want me to read another chapter. 2's in the chat if you want me to discuss what I just read. All right. Let me get a link over here. All right. Let's see if my little DMs want to behave on this computer of mine. All right. I did start at the beginning, so you could probably catch it from there. All right. So I've got... All right, that should get you in the stream with me. The 2 of you have been DM'd. All right, let me go ahead and turn off the screen share. All right. All right. Twitter, I have to cut off Discord when I'm live because my computer won't handle it.
Hello, woman who is mad.
Hello, Batman. How are you?
I'm still alive, despite Benny's best efforts.
Yeah, we haven't seen you around this past week. Either your sleep schedule's been goofy again or you've been busy.
Bit of this, bit of that. Busy both. But what you read so far, it's solid writing, but I think she's slipping up a little bit, writing the male character a bit. The "in my heart" bit, I wouldn't have written. I mean, this is just personal preference, but I wouldn't have written that coming from a male character. It doesn't feel right.
Because Scarpetta is actually female.
Well, I thought it was still the male character that you were reading.
Marino is the male character. He is the head of the detective department in the police. Scarpetta is actually female. She is the female
Right.
medical examiner.
Yeah, well, that definitely fits with the picking of the scissors, especially in an American police office, because there would be a gun handy, for one thing. It's it fits together. Yeah, it definitely shows the different perspective that the female writer brings to a story than a male writer would.
Yeah. I mean, I love the detail that she goes into with the laser and what they were finding, and the fact that they can't identify the substance that glows under the laser light.
Oh, I know what it is.
Well, Mariel thinks it's oil of some sort.
Yeah, it's not. It's a secretion that Zeph's species leave behind.
I don't think Scarpetta writes alien mystery novels.
No, I think Mariel's probably bang on there.
Yeah,
it's either motor oil or some kind of industrial fluid.
Mm-hmm. We're not going to find out until we keep reading, and I think chapter 3 is going to be next Saturday. But I like how she weaves the stuff and how she's building us to like Scarpetta. Now Scarpetta's wondering what the hell she's got to do to get Marino to respect her as a professional.
That's very easy. Do a job.
At the beginning of the series, she's pretty much, just establishing herself and trying to, establish her reputation.
She doesn't want to fall in the trap that a lot of female writers do when writing this sort of thing, where a woman's got to work twice as hard to get the same recognition from a man. It's not true. Somebody like Marino is going to respect her if she does her job. The same as you would a bloke. Yeah,
she does it well. I mean, she concentrates on her job. But I think her frustration with Marino is the fact that when she wants the information, he just kind of lollygags about giving it to her.
Yeah, and he probably would with a male forensic person as well.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. She's definitely giving the characters their own personality.
Yeah.
Instead of what a lot of writers do is pull personalities out of a box in a way.
Yeah.
It's something we got taught in English, actually. A lot of what you'd call paperback writers back in the 70s, they'd have a certain set of personalities which they'd assign different characters in their books. But yeah, it's a quick way to do it, but it's also lazy and it's repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
from other books that I've read in her series, she is not really repetitive at all. And I mean, as she develops and as the books go on and the series go on, you actually get introduced to Lucy more and more as well. She becomes a little more active in what's going on in these books. So, but she introduces, one major character and one secondary character, not at the same time, because we've heard of Lucy at the beginning of the book, and she mentions Lucy throughout the book, but we're not really going to get to know Lucy until we're further on into the series.
Oh, yeah. I understand that. And, well, with you saying, excuse me for the cough, Scarpetta's a female character. She's basically writing a story from her own strengths, because if it was a man they'd be writing, Scarpetta would be a male character.
Yeah.
It's just writing from your own strengths, your own perspective. It's the best way to do it.
Oh yeah, you always have to. In my opinion, if you're writing something like this, you have to write what you know.
Yeah.
You can't write something that you don't know about and try and make it believable. My first fantasy novel that I tried to write was a sibling type relationship, and I got it all wrong because I'm an only kid. And so I had to ask people that had siblings, is this the way they interact with one another? And, in order to smooth it out and refine it. Let me see. Copyright page. 1990. This was printed and copywritten in 1990. So this book is 27 years old. Hi, Dark Art.
Sorry about that.
There's
the
a-
evils of the telephone.
Ah,
Yeah, so I had to put myself on mute because you didn't want me bothered with the phone.
yeah, that's fine. Spangle, I wanted to know what year the book was written. It was copywritten in 1990. Mm-hmm. Lucy's still a little girl in this one.
Yeah, I'll explain the stuff with the laser as well, because using lasers in forensics and stuff was very new then.
Mm-hmm. They were still experimenting and trying to figure out what limitations it was, how accurate it was.
Like you said, Mario said, Mario, I can never pronounce her name right. was saying it was probably motor oil. I think she's probably bang on there, like I said before. Hi, Dark Art.
No, what inspired the Bones series was there was an actual there goes my brain. I can't pronounce it. Anthropologist, thank you, that actually wrote a book that inspired the TV show. Patricia Cornwell's books did not do that because Bones' character is actually based on the main character in that TV show. Oh, cool. She's on the Border Forensics Institute now. Cool. That is neat. So that's good to know.
I bet she's as gung-ho a psycho as the one on the TV show.
Yep. I mean, to me, I would like to see a couple of her books turned into movies, but done correctly. Because you've got to, there's nuances to her books that if you don't figure out how to include them in the movie, you're going to miss it.
Well, really speaking, I think the only person who can do a TV, a TV serialization of a book correctly is the person who wrote it, and
yeah,
half the time they don't have the skill set necessary for it. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to. I mean, to me, in order to do a successful TV show or movie, you have got to have the author involved in the creative process.
I would say so, yeah. Which probably explains why a lot of TV and movie renditions of books either tend to be bad compared to the book or not that similar.
I know I hate it when they leave out large chunks of the book that would explain so much.
Yeah. I mean, just before I came on here, I was watching the Man-Thing movie, and it bore very little resemblance to the comic book. If you remember the Man-Thing,
yeah, I remember the Man-Thing,
but very little resemblance to it. Although Avi Arvid had a lot to do with it, and he's renowned for that.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. It's writers and movie makers, the two different animals.
I mean, you want to yell at the TV, you want to yell at the big screen. When you read the book, when you're watching this, and then they skip over something that you know is important to keep
or put something in there that shouldn't have been there in the first place. I think that's just as bad.
Oh yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
And something every generation does is alter something for their own to suit their own political agenda. Everybody, every generation has done it. Every generation will do it. That's annoying as well.
Because, like, I still contend that, I read all the Harry Potter books. I watched all the movies. And the one thing they never really showed in the movie, which would have taken maybe minutes, was the hospital scene where you see Neville going to visit his parents in the Incurable Curses wing.
Uh-huh.
Because that would have explained why he hated Bellatrix Lestrange so much. All you saw was his hatred for her, but no reason why, really.
But if he'd been a female character, you would have seen that.
Yep.
Oh, the Harry Potter.
Spangle Lime.
Hmm?
The name of the author is Kathy Reichs. And it's, I had to look it up. You got me curious. Sorry. The first book in her series was released in 1997 and was titled Deja Dead. It followed Dr. Temperance Brennan, the director of forensic anthropology for the Providence of Quebec, as she worked to solve a case that only she considered to be the work of a serial killer. The book became a New York Times bestseller, won the 1997 Ellis Award for the best first novel, and evolved into a series of successful novels following that character. So your mom was just a little off, but that's okay. But yeah, you got me curious. I had to look. That was my ADD.
So after you finish this book, what are you moving on to?
I'm probably going to accept at least 3 suggestions and do maybe another poll on Twitter to find out what you guys want me to read next, to see what's going on. Or you can put the suggestions in, if you're a part of my Discord, and I know you are, Batman, suggested in the Writers Workshop channel on the Discord.
I believe I've already made a suggestion.
Yep, you did. You wrote it in there.
Yep.
I'm not reading 50 Shades of Grey.
I didn't put that in there.
No, Mario wrote it in the live chat.
No, I think Mario was on about that Fallout book, 50 Shades of Gary. Which is basically about a bunch of clones.
Yeah. The Body Farm was a really good book, but I think next time I'm either going to entertain Batman's suggestion that he got for me, or I'm going to do Robin Cook, because somebody wanted to get on, help me discuss those. And I've got all these Robin Cook novels that my mother has sent me, and I have not read, as they would say, nary a one.
I see.
Which my mother would probably, stare a hole right through my head to the back of my skull.
Yeah, and she's Cuban, right?
Yeah. But mothers, they have a talent of, they're staring at you, and when you're not paying attention.
Well, mothers can make you feel guilty when it seems to everybody else that they're praising you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're evil.
They're really good at guilt trips. I like the way she explains it is, you follow the terminology, you can understand the terminology. She doesn't use medical terms that are so technical that it goes right over your head.
Yeah. She seems like a good writer, and I suspect if she does use a complicated medical term, she'd provide a brief explanation of it, like good writers would. Mm-hmm.
And not a really clinical explanation, but this is why, this happens kind of thing. I mean, the hardest thing to do, I think, when you're writing a novel is describing a character and not make it sound like, something you're writing on a police report.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to use similes and descriptive terms rather than just a flat out, I need 5'2", blue eyes, fair hair. Yeah.
Yeah. I when I first started writing, it was fan fiction for the Shadowrun world, and one guy was like, okay, you gotta learn to work the description into the story. This kind of sounds like you're describing somebody for a mugshot. Let's see if we can fix this. I said, okay. Yes, please.
There's one I distinctly remember from it was a short story I read. It was supposed to be like a Raven Chandler type world. Oh, yeah. that type of, but the description was this guy. He was the principal. He was the killer. And the description, if I can remember, it was yeah. For a hard and brutal killer, you wouldn't have guessed it to look at him. I mean, he had one of those round, sort of chubby faces, like a cheeky schoolboy. A bright, cheerful twinkle in those, in his blue eyes. Yeah, he looked for all the world like butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. But then you had to take into account the knife in his hand, dripping blood onto the deep pile carpet.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have to do things like that in your writing to catch people off guard. Sometimes, I think, in my opinion, and it's when you catch them off guard, that's when they keep turning the pages.
Yeah, you've got to humanise your descriptions. I mean, you've seen a little bit of how I write, so.
You write very, very well. I'm very vivid too. I was able to visualize just about everything you were just.
Oh, I'm pleased with that. Sometimes I find that when you're writing something, you've got to stop yourself, otherwise you're going to over-describe things.
It's like this one little chapter episode thing that I'm going to start working on and putting in my blog next for a chapter by chapter thing is like a science fiction kind of book.
Uh-huh.
And it's set like in the cyberpunk universe. And it's about a mage that kind of has a problem keeping herself out of trouble.
Ah.
Yeah. And the beginning of the book is Laura sat there watching him, still fuzzy about what happened the night before. She knew she had kept an eye on her drink and never walked away without taking it. She always put her hand over it when she looked away. She did everything right. So how did she wind up in a dark room with a flickering bulb that could go at any second? Her eyes flew open wide as her mind injected the terror as to what might have happened. Did he rape me? She did a quick check, starting with her flat boots, her eyes taking in every inch of her pants to her waist. That's when she heard the raspy voice. If you're wondering if I raped you, don't bother. I don't rape women. By the end of the week, you may wish I had. What do you mean, week? Her throat was dry, and voice reflected it. He came over with a cup of water. She squeezed her lips together. Come on, it's only water. He stood and took a sip. Waiting about 10 minutes before he bent over to give her another sip, she drank the water. What am I doing here? Heard you as someone could fix people. You know, with spells and potions and shit. She slowly looked him up from his work boots to his face without moving her head. She squinted her left eye. You could have just called me. There is this invention called the phone. She couldn't track his girth coming across the room, but she felt the sting of his hand making contact with her left cheek. She winced, but didn't cry out. Durable for a pink skin. Quick for an orc. You must be an internal. Yep, and your smart remark was not appreciated. You know big words. He went to slap her again, and his hand hit an invisible wall. His face was a mask of pain as the familiar crunch of bone was heard. He pointed with his good hand. How did I cast without waving my hands? Practice, big boy, and you might not want to do that again.
That was good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you didn't fall at the trap, which a lot of people do. I've done myself when you try to write in science fiction. You find that a lot of people, when they're writing science fiction, even a lot of big names in science fiction, when they write it, they get lost in the science fiction and forget about the human.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is easy to do.
Yeah, there's a story that I have yet to put on my computer that is still on a notebook because I typed it up and printed it up so I wouldn't lose it. And that one has a description of a room that this guy was like going to hack into the system with that everybody said was, it was very vivid the way I described everything because, you could have said it was a rundown hotel. Well, I basically described it as he was walking in and looking around, and I think I described the oven as looking like someone had tried to take it and given up halfway through.
Uh-huh. That's quite descriptive.
I mean, it's and that's what I tried to explain to my son. I'm like, when you set a scene, You can't just say, so-and-so walked into the hull of the ship. Well, if it's a ship nobody's seen before, you've got to paint the picture. You've got to put them there. Thank you, Ghost Dog. You know, that's the way I think. Because if it's a world inside your head that is a fantasy or science fiction world that you know nobody's read about, nobody's going to know what it looks like.
Neither do you initially, do you?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be able to picture it in your head, and then you've got to be able to turn that picture into words.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Spangle Lime, it isn't you who has to handwrite. I started out handwriting my stuff and type them in. And when I usually type it in, I type it in double space, print it up, go back and read it, and make notes in the spaces in between the lines.
I find when if I'm trying to write something, computer is a hell of a good tool because it's so easy to correct.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what people were like before the invention of typewriters when they were writing stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I always liked the feel, maybe it's the calligrapher in me, but I've always liked the feel of a pen on a piece of paper when you're writing a story.
I had to do too many lines at school, that's why I don't like actual handwriting. The amount of times I've written out, I must not insert punishment here, is nobody's business.
Yeah. I mean, I started out in high school, in junior high actually, where I had like a 3-subject notebook and I filled it halfway with poetry and somebody stole the notebook.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I had accidentally left it underneath the desk chair, and when I went back to go get it, somebody had taken it.
It'd be funny if it was your English teacher.
I don't know. I asked her, and I asked her if she knew, and I described the notebook, and she said she didn't remember seeing a notebook like that. She saw me bring it in, but she didn't see anybody carry it out, and I'm the kind of person that if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. And as soon as I write it down, I forget it. So if I have an inspiration for a poem, it doesn't matter if it's a piece of printer paper, the back of an envelope, I have got to write it down before I forget it.
Or even Roland's arm. I bet Roland's woken up many a time to find his chest covered in scroll.
Yeah.
I remember once we had to write, this was for school in English class, we had to write a humorous horror story. So I did one. It was about a guy, he'd been attacked by what he thought was a wolf. It wasn't a wolf, it was a werewolf. Yeah. And this guy, pretty henpecked. And one of the scenes is the full moon, his first change. And he's managed to get out of the house, out away from his nagging wife, and he's up this tree, transformed. And below him, there's this little old lady in the park with a poodle. So he leaps, but he miscalculates, lands face first on the pavement, and gets savaged by this poodle. I actually got an A+ for that as well.
Cool.
But I think writing, sometimes you've got this idea, you put it down, and it comes out brilliantly. And other times you sit there, and no matter how hard you try, nothing fits, nothing works right. You've got to be in the mood for it.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of liked my English lit class in that she didn't force it. She would just give you the subject if she wanted you to write something about it, and she would give you a deadline, but she wouldn't, ask for updates on how far along it was. And when I wrote, it was in high school, we actually read Beowulf.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote 2 poems about Grendel.
Mm.
And the first poem I brought in, she read, and she actually stuck it on her bulletin board. And she said because she said it was the first time anybody had ever written from the perspective of the monster and what his lair looked like to them. And I'm like, every once in a while, I do stuff like that. Like how most people in Frankenstein, they will identify with the doctor, and I empathized more with Frankenstein's monster.
So did I. I always felt sorry for him.
He didn't ask to be created. And then all he wanted was a companion, and he was denied that. I mean, I could understand his anger and his frustration.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I also felt sorry for the one in Young Frankenstein as well.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when he met the blind man.
Yeah. I mean, you learned more about Frankenstein's monster when he was talking to the blind man, because it was the first time he wasn't judged in the novel, because the guy didn't see what he looked like. He couldn't.
Yeah, and then his family burst in on him one day.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember the novel correctly, the Baron Frankenstein didn't use bits of dead bodies to build him. It was, he basically built him whole cloth from chemicals, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. He piecemealed him together and then was like, okay, we're good. He works.
Yeah.
You know, why is he angry at me? I don't want to make him a girlfriend. It's like, dude.
I mean, I've read the original novel by Mary Shelley, and the thing which actually got me to read it was Marvel Comics did a serialization of it, which was very true to the novel. But
yeah, I read the novel by Mary Shelley as well. I read it voluntarily during a summer break, which completely surprised my English teacher when we started the year, and she asked us what we had read over the summer.
I think the most boring book I've ever read is The Time Machine.
That wasn't one of our required readings. I have to say, out of all the books that we were required to read in school, the most boring one for me was The Grapes of Wrath.
Is that the one about hemorrhoids?
No, that was the one that was written about migrant farmers during the Depression here in the United States.
Yeah, they made a film about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
My mum and dad made me sit through it because they were interested in it. And God, it was boring.
The book was worse. It was one of those books I had to force myself to read because it kept putting me to sleep.
Yeah, I got a D when we had to do War and Peace because I just could not get through that.
She had us read a book called The Invisible Man, not the one that most people equate that title with, but it was a black man living in segregation times that was able to survive by like stealing electricity, stealing utilities from people, and nobody really noticing that he existed. And that was kind of boring for me too, because it's not that it wasn't my genre, it just really didn't grab and keep my attention. And my dad was quite surprised when one of our required readings was in The Diary of Anne Frank, and I couldn't put that book down.
I don't believe that.
Because he looked at me and goes, you don't like anything that having to do with World War II history, but you can't put that book down? I'm like, it's a different perspective.
Yeah.
It's not cold facts and dates and what happened when. It's the story of a family during that time.
Yeah, and that's especially when it's written by the person who went through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had to do that at school as well. And yeah, it is a powerful one to do.
Yep.
No, it's a powerful one to read because you almost go through it.
And I've got to find it because I know I still have the book somewhere. My friend Amanda lent me a book that was also World War II era. It was about a family in one of the Scandinavian countries that was actually instrumental in starting an underground of sorts for smuggling Jews out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And how they set it up, and how they forged papers, and how they changed the Jewish people's identity so they wouldn't be rounded up. It is a very interesting read, and I've got to find the book because I can't remember the name of the book. I think it was called The Hidden Room or something like that. But when I do find it, I'll probably put it in the writer's workshop because it's a very, very interesting book written from one of the daughter's perspectives.
Sounds interesting.
It is. It was one of those surprising books that I couldn't put down until I was done with it. It was very, very interesting how they started everything, because at first it was her father owned a watch shop, and they were seeing slowly how the propaganda from the Germans was seeping into their country and how the laws were changing, and the fact that a lot of their friends that were Jewish started disappearing. And so they put their heads together and they said that we've got to do something to help the rest of our friends. And that's when they started contacting other people that were of like minds to sort of make an underground railroad, so to speak, to help those people out. I've got to find the book because I can't remember the name of it. I am so blanked out on the name of the book, but I put it down here somewhere. I hate it when I can't remember the name of a book. It bugs me to death.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, for me, the story, obviously, in any book, if you're reading fiction, the story's the most important thing. The story's got to flow, it's got to make sense, and it's got to surprise you. But, that's the only part of it. The characters have got to engage you, even if you don't identify with any of the characters. They've still got to engage you and get you interested in them. Yeah,
I mean, I like those kind of books, and I tried reading on 3 separate occasions. I tried to start reading Dracula by Bram Stoker, and I don't know what it was, but I just could not get hooked into that.
It's because it's all in letter forms. If it's anything like the one I read, it's all in like correspondence.
Yeah.
That takes away, because people didn't write like they spoke when they were writing letters. So it takes away a hell of a lot of the emotion.
Yeah.
You take emotion away from a story and that kills it.
Yeah, now I got a Postmortem everybody's trying to figure out the name of the book now. Yeah, the Ten Boom family. That was the name of the family.
Well, if a Postmortem wants to talk, she might as well come on here.
Let me see if I can look it up real quick on my Kindle. If my Kindle wants to cooperate, because it's been as slow as my computer is of late. The Hiding Place. Thank you, Postmortem. That's the name of the book, The Hiding Place.
I'm not really sure. Spangle Time says that their favourite book is The Likeness by Tara French. Or French, if you need to read it.
I'll put it in my server when I give you the invite, Spangle Lime, and stick it in the writer's workshop.
I'm not sure what my favourite book would be, really.
Yeah. I mean, it is The Hiding Place is written from, that family's perspective, and they're Christian. And sooner or later in the book, they actually get rounded up and put in an internment or a concentration camp for helping the Jews.
I think one of the best 2 books I've ever read was the modernized versions of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I've actually tried reading it as it was, originally written. No, because it was retranslated into English. But you know what I mean, in the prose, and it's just too heavy going. The modernized version, where it's still the same story, it's still set in the same time, same things happen, but it's written as in a more modern style.
Yeah,
it's a damn good read.
Oh, cool. So I want to, highlight different books and stuff like that on this. With this particular series that I'm doing here with the writer's workshop. And inevitably, when I finish setting up the forum on my website, whoever is active in my writer's workshop is going to get an invite to the forum so they can log in. And the forum is going to be set up to where we can check in every morning. We can actually say what our writing goals are going to be for the day, an X amount of words, or, I'm going to write this chapter today. And at the end of the day, you can check back in and go, I got it. I got the chapter done. So we can keep each other on track for book projects we have.
You ever write stuff which you don't intend to show to anybody or share with anybody? Because I do. I've got to admit.
Yeah, I've got a few poems that I'm very reticent to share with everybody, which is why I haven't written all of my poems, recorded all of my poems and put them up on my chapter, because some of them in my life where my parents weren't getting along too well. So it's really, really depressing. It was cathartic for me, but that's not the kind of stuff I want to share with everybody.
Yeah. Besides, when you do stuff like that, from what I've read about actual, published authors and that, they're doing stuff like that can lead to actually writing stuff which you do want to publish or show out.
Yep. I mean, I don't think, have I read anything that's nonfiction? I think most of my nonfiction books I use as reference for other things.
I tend not to read stuff which is set in the real world because I live in the real world, and for me, reading fiction is escapism.
Yeah, that's the way I look at the fiction that I like to read and stuff like that, because I like to put my mind, when I open a book and start reading, in another place and time to forget about where I am for a little while.
Yeah.
And if I can help people do that when I finish writing the books, or by reading this every Saturday, then I've, helped everybody else do a little bit of, escape and sort of help relax them as well.
Yeah, this is why I could never stand soap operas. I know British soap operas are vastly different from American ones. Ours are set in, like, what you class as the real world, where normal people live in. Yeah,
ours are set like current times too. It's just, I don't.
Yeah, it's basically the idle rich for your soap operas, isn't it? It's all G.R. Ewing and what was it, dysentery?
Well, we had and they're still going on, from about 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. There's soap operas that have been going on for 25, 30 plus years.
Same over here.
Yeah. Oh, Spangle, are you talking about Ender's Game?
Enders. Don't know what I misread it. I misread Spangle. I thought it said EastEnders. Sorry, Spangle.
Well, I don't know. That's why I asked, because because I would absolutely love to, after I finish this and we move on a little bit. Oh, EastEnders. She was talking about EastEnders. When I finish, I want to eventually read a science fiction book, and I'm sort of torn in between Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card and I, Robot. Because I loved the book, and they did not do it any justice when they translated it into a movie. I mean, there were some aspects of the movie that were, congruent to the book, and then some stuff they left out that they really needed to put in.
I, Robot wasn't bad.
No.
The movie.
No, I Robot the movie wasn't bad at all.
Not sure I don't think I've read the book. I've read a few Asimov stuff. Some of it's hard to get into, some of it's quite easy. In fact, some of it's quite childishly easy, but that's just his writing style. I've been told to read Game of Thrones, but these days I think computers killed my my book reading.
Yeah, it's hard you've got to make the time to separate yourself and unplug yourself from your computer to get some reading done.
Yes.
And when we get set up into an apartment, I want to be able to actually, you know, join the book club again, because I know I can buy ebooks, but there's something about disconnecting from all the electronics, flipping on a light, sitting in a comfortable chair, and opening up a book.
Yep. And another thing about reading is if you've got insomnia, a book is a good way to get rid of it.
Yeah. I could read. Well, I've never read Starship Troopers. That would be an interesting one to do.
Yes, Starship Troopers is. You would, if you've seen the film, you would not recognize the book.
Oh yeah, my second husband was he had the Robert Heinlein novel Starship Troopers, and we read them. We watched the movie, and it was almost 2 hours of him bitching about how they fucked it up. Seriously, that's.
I thought it was a good movie, but it wasn't. It was barely like anything in the book.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing he said was, "Where's the power armor?" They have power armor.
Yeah, the mobile infantry, they all had power armor. There were no women in the mobile infantry.
And then I think it was 2 years or 3, 4 years later, they came out with G.I. Joe, and he goes, "Oh, see, now they have power armor, but what happened with power armor with Starship Troopers?" Because, that movie. I mean, if you hadn't read the book, the movie was entertaining.
Oh, yeah, no, Denise Richards, what do you call it? Denise Richards' character in that?
Yeah.
She was an out-and-out bitch.
Yeah, she was, I agree. And my second husband had to explain to me the problems with the John Carter movie. He said they tried to smash at least 3 books into that movie, which is why the movie doesn't make as much sense as it should.
I still like it.
I found it was really good, and I might actually download that particular series and read it, and then go back and watch the movie, and I'll probably have the same reaction.
Very Edgar Rice Burroughs pulp.
Huh?
It's very Edgar Rice Burroughs pulp.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up on the Tarzan, the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan, but my dad had the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, and when I read them, I didn't recognize the character in the books.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you grow up watching the movies and finally crack a book open, you're like, okay, this is vastly different. And sometimes it's different in a good way because it gives you a perspective, and sometimes it's different in a bad way because you're like, okay, if it would have been closer to the book, it would have been a little bit better.
That's what I like about the recent Jason Momoa Conan. They'd actually done the character a lot closer to how Howard had written him than Arnold's big dumb barbarian with a sword.
Yeah.
Because if one thing Conan wasn't, it was dumb. According to the books, by the time he was in his 30s, he could read and write several different languages. 4 of them were extinct languages. He had a working knowledge of antiques, ancient coins. He was quite an intelligent man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of authors that are really, really intelligent, and you can tell in their writing their intelligence by, how they weave the book, how they weave the story, the terminology they use, and, how they make you think.
Yeah, and I agree with what you say about audiobooks. Yeah, it's an easy way to hear the story, but it's not the same as reading it. I think when you read it, you take it in more.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like, especially with my mind being creative, once the author is able to build the world in my mind as I read the book, I tend to remember the book a whole lot better.
Yeah. Like Star Wars, I read the novel before I saw the film, and I was actually disappointed with the film. But 1978.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the novelization was a lot better than the book than the movie.
It often tends to be that way, and I think out of all the books that I've read and then gone back and watched movies based on the books, the ones that I was the most disappointed with was I read Tommyknockers by Stephen King, and then the miniseries came out, and I watched the miniseries, and it was like almost completely different from the book. It had nothing to do with the book.
Yeah, I've heard a few people saying that because they weren't becoming slaves, so they were becoming the aliens from the ship, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
In
the book, they were turning into the aliens. In the TV show, they were becoming slaves, and I'm like, no. It's much more interesting the other way.
Having told the more recent novel serialization of Salem's Lot is a lot closer to the book as well. The one with Rob Lowe.
Yeah.
It's better acted than the David Soul one as well. There's this part where the main character's old school teacher.
Yeah.
The part where the gravedigger, after he died, comes back into the bedroom. You know the scene I'm on about?
Yeah, I think so. Did you just knock something off the bed?
No, it wasn't me.
He's looking awfully guilty.
I'm not looking. This is how I normally look.
He is looking awfully guilty right about now. Mm-hmm. Now he's trying to suck up, like, no, I didn't knock anything off the bed, Mama. The stuff you heard was not me.
So you're not about running. But that part, it was a black guy out of Homicide: Life on the Streets.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed what a phenomenal actor he is, because he's supposed to be terrified because he knows this guy's dead. Yet he's standing there. The guy, the actor who just said, he really sells the part of being terrified and trying to remain calm at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I would take it up.
Okay, put it in the writer's workshop, the name of it and stuff, and I'll see if I can check it out, because I'm finally knocking out the extra commissions that I have so I can balance out this schedule so I can make some free time for myself.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah. Because I am never again going to sit there and go, yeah, I can do 5 books. No, I can't.
You bit off more than you can chew, did you?
Yeah, I took on way too much, which is why I haven't really been uploading any videos or anything like that. I just haven't had the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Excuse me a second while I gargle this.
I mean, I would love to read, like I said, after this one, I'm going to probably either do a poll on Twitter or I'm going to throw it out there as a pinned tweet on Discord to let everybody decide what the next author is going to be. And then whoever wins the poll gets to pick the book.
Nice.
So
what are you asking for in bribes?
I mean, this is purely an experiment, and so far it's working out good because everybody seems to like not only me reading, but, you know, discussing books and stuff. Because to me, it's really important to stay in practice with reading, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, because there's too many people in the world that can't read.
Yeah. This day and age, especially, that's a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if I get more and more people in here listening to the books that, you know, are of the mind, well, I don't like sitting down and reading a book. If I can just get to that one person for them to go, and go out and get the book and start reading it, I feel like I'm accomplishing something.
Which is always good.
Mm-hmm. Because I know a few people in my life that are friends that go, well, I'd rather watch the movie. I'm not that much of a book reader. And I keep trying to tell him, you're missing so much by not reading the book.
Yeah. You're missing the inner workings of the character's mind, which an actor and a film can only hint at.
Exactly. I mean, you really can't convey inner thoughts and motivations in like a 2.5 hour movie. So much of the backstory gets left out.
Yeah. Far too much, usually.
Mm-hmm. Far, far too much. I mean, there's been so many books that I have really gotten into that were really interesting, and then I watched the movie, and I'm like, but you should have left that part in because it explains more.
Yeah. Well, what the hell did he put that part in? That wasn't in the book, and it totally ruined the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
well, they throw parts of the book in the movie and leave the parts that would really leave people in their seats out of the movie. And it's like, oh, what are you doing?
I've got to Google something else again because I've got a point about that.
I mean, I think it was the Order of the Phoenix movie that they did that with. Most of the slow parts of that book they put in the movie. And I'm like, okay, you're boring people at this point because there's not enough going on in the parts of the book that you chose to put in the movie. To keep people who haven't read the book in the seats in the theater.
Yeah. The Dark Tower. Idris Elba's got the part of Roland.
Mm-hmm.
And what most of the people who read the book complain about, it's not because he's a black guy and it's white blackwashing or whatever. It's because for one thing, Stephen King actually said that when he wrote this part, it was based on Clint Eastwood very much.
Yeah.
But also, it's going to affect his dealings with Susanna Dean, one of the characters who in the book was wheelchair bound.
Mm-hmm.
She had multiple personality disorder. The two personalities you first encounter is this posh upper class woman, and this like ghetto girl. The first one's the posh one is this Odetta Susanna Holmes. Well mannered, priggish, but she doesn't like white people. And the second one is Detta Susanna Walker, she's basically psychotic. She hates white people as well, particularly men.
Yeah, and to make it it's all but black changes the entire dynamic of that meeting and that relationship.
Yeah, because part of that is what being forced to be around two white men and a white boy.
Mm-hmm. As Gerbil says, it removes the racism.
Yeah, it doesn't just do that. It brings the multiple personality disorder to a head, and in a way, it merges the personalities into a third personality.
Yep.
Who, like Gerbil says, it removes the racism from her.
It does. I mean, there are certain things, I give creative license to people that are translating books into movies to a point.
Yeah.
But when it's certain key relationships that move the book along or show you how a character reacts to certain situations, and you change the dynamic by changing who the character is, whether by ethnic background or the way they react, you change the tone of the whole story when you do that.
Yes. Well, yeah. It's actually back to my English teacher again. He's on about writing stories, and he caught a great one. A story is like an ecosystem. Every part, is dependent on another part to function, and they all come together to form a whole. If you mess with one part, you mess with all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite right, really, because a good story grows organically.
Yes, it does. And now it is time for me to say, for those of you that are in the live chat, thank you for participating. Thank you for coming on with me and having this discussion, Batman. At 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, Dark Art on his channel is going to have a Quiplash stream where he invites people to come on with him and play the game, as well as participate in the audience. You guys go over to Dark Art's channel, and have a little bit of fun for a little while. And tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, our favorite Schmeckle is having his regularly scheduled Cuntstream. Again, that is at 11 o'clock Eastern Time p.m. for those of us here in the United States. And that would probably be, 4 o'clock your time?
Probably.
Okay, probably. So before I end this stream, once again, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, Dark Arts channel for Quiplash. You guys have a great Saturday. And if you keep your minds open, inspiration will follow. Have a nice day.